Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning today.
Yeah, it's a powerful one for sure.
It is. And, I was really struck by these excerpts, about how he found meaning in these just unimaginable circumstances
Oh, absolutely.
in Nazi concentration
Yeah.
camps. So I'm really curious to kind of unpack that with you today. What can we learn from his experience?
Well, it's interesting because Frankl, he wasn't just some, armchair philosopher theorizing about suffering.
Right.
He was a psychiatrist before the war, and then he ends up in Auschwitz
Yeah.
facing these just horrific conditions.
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading about the finger game,
Right.
it's hard to even wrap my head around that
Oh, absolutely.
that an SS officer could just casually, point and decide who lives and who dies.
It's
It's
this
just
level of I don't even know.
dehumanization that's really hard to comprehend.
Yeah, and that must have been just so like psychologically jarring for him. It was, and he describes it as this sort of primal survival instinct kicking in.
Right.
Just this need to exist, to stay alive at any cost.
Right.
And there's this really telling moment early on where he's trying to hold on to his manuscript,
Oh, wow.
which is his life's work, essentially.
Yeah.
And this older prisoner just yells shit at him.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Right.
This is all meaningless now.
Yeah, it's like everything he's worked for his whole life.
So,
Yeah, and he talks about this emotional death
yeah.
that sets in, and that sounds like it's even beyond just sadness or despair.
It is. It's more like this blunting of the emotions.
Mm.
It's a detachment from normal human experiences.
Right.
And there's this really poignant scene where he's on a train passing through Vienna,
Okay.
which is his hometown,
Yeah.
and he desperately wants to see his street.
Uh-huh.
But the other prisoners who had been there longer, they just scoffed at him.
Well-
Like they had already reached this point of emotional numbness.
It's hard to imagine, how anyone could find meaning in such a dehumanizing environment.
Right.
And yet that's exactly what Frankl sets out to do.
He does.
That's what the book is about.
Yeah, and that's where his concept of the last of human freedoms comes in.
Okay, I'm curious about this.
So he argues that even in a concentration camp, stripped of everything else,
Yeah.
you still have the freedom to choose your attitude.
Mm.
So even when it feels like you have no control over your external circumstances,
Right.
you still have agency over your internal response.
That's why we always have that choice.
Always.
Even in those situations.
Yeah, and I think that's why this idea resonates with so many people.
Yeah.
Because it applies to all of us, even outside of these extreme circumstances.
Right.
Think about it. You're facing a difficult project at work,
Yeah.
a relationship challenge, a health scare. These situations can feel overwhelming. But Frankl reminds us that we always have a choice in how we react, how we frame those experiences internally.
Yeah. And he even talks about finding solace in the image of his wife
He does.
while he's enduring a forced march.
Yeah, that mental image becomes a source of strength and purpose for him.
So it's not about denying the suffering.
No.
It's about finding something, some flicker of meaning
Yeah.
to hold on to.
Right, exactly.
It's really quite remarkable, isn't it?
It is. And he even talks about finding moments of humor in the camps.
Really. It's hard to imagine.
I know, it seems almost impossible, but he insists it's true. He shares this anecdote about a surgeon who's making jokes about the foreman constantly yelling, action, action.
Oh, wow.
Like it's dark humor, of course.
Yeah.
But it highlights this attempt to reclaim some sliver of humanity
Right.
in the face of dehumanization.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Frankl argues that because suffering fills the soul completely, even the smallest joys become amplified.
Like that story about when they were being transported and they realized they were going to Dachau instead of Mauthausen.
Yes.
I mean, I was shocked by that.
Yeah.
They were overjoyed.
They were overjoyed.
Even though Dachau was still a concentration camp.
It was still a concentration camp,
Yeah.
but it highlights this relative nature of suffering,
Yeah.
how our perception can shift depending on the circumstances.
That's a really powerful point.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and he also talks about the psychological effects of camp life, how the prisoners lost their individuality.
Right. It was a survival tactic in a way.
Yeah.
You had to blend in, avoid standing out,
Uh-huh.
You couldn't attract the attention of the SS guards.
Right.
You had to become a number, a cog in the machine.
Yeah, and he describes that that chilling scene
Yeah.
where they would exchange numbers
Right.
to save a brother.
It shows how little value was placed on individual identity.
Yeah, it's really heavy stuff.
It is.
But he also talks about this desire for solitude,
He does.
even amidst this loss of individuality.
He yearned for these moments of quiet reflection
Yeah.
amidst the constant scrutiny and the lack of privacy.
Right.
And he found this solitude near the tent for corpses.
Wow. That's
A stark image,
yeah.
but it allowed him to reconnect with his inner self.
Makes you think about how, we seek out those moments of solitude
Yeah.
in our own lives.
Even in the busyness of the modern world,
Yeah.
we need those moments
To reflect.
to connect with what truly matters.
And Frankl's experience suggests that, even when you're stripped of everything else,
Mm,
that inner search for meaning persists.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental part of who we are.
It's hard to even think about like the psychology of the guards and all of this. I mean, how could they commit such atrocities? Were
Right.
they just, monsters?
Well, Frankl really grappled with that question.
Yeah.
And what he observed is that many of the guards weren't, inherently evil,
Right.
but ordinary people who had been corrupted by this system
Uh-huh.
that had completely devalued human life.
So the environment,
Yeah,
the ideology they were immersed in,
absolutely.
it all kind of contributed to their actions.
It's a chilling reminder of the power of systems and ideologies to influence individual behavior.
Yeah, for sure. But even amidst all of this darkness, he also witnessed like these rare instances of decency among the guards.
Yeah, he did.
Like it's hard to even imagine,
I know, it speaks to the complexity of human nature, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even in a system designed to strip people of their humanity,
Right.
some individuals manage to hold on to a flicker of compassion.
It really makes you think
Yeah.
about the choices we make, every day
Uh-huh.
and how we choose to respond to the systems around us.
Right, yeah.
And he also doesn't shy away from describing the challenges of liberation.
No, he doesn't.
Like when they were finally free.
Yeah, he talks about this feeling of depersonalization that a lot of the liberated prisoners experienced.
Oh, wow.
They couldn't really grasp their newfound freedom.
Almost like they couldn't believe it was real.
Yeah, like they couldn't believe it was real.
Wow.
And Frankl describes, walking through fields of flowers,
Yeah.
but feeling numb, detached,
Huh.
unable to fully process the experience.
So almost like they were still, mentally trapped
Right.
in the camp.
Exactly. The trauma had run so deep
Right.
that it took time to really reconnect with the world outside.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He compares it to the bends.
Oh, wow.
That decompression sickness that
Wow.
diverse experience.
Right.
If they surface too quickly,
Uh-huh.
it can be so disorienting and even dangerous.
Yeah.
So it was a similar kind of experience for them.
But he describes this really powerful moment
Yeah.
of kneeling in a field after liberation,
He does.
like overwhelmed with gratitude and this sense of like, the
Yeah.
vastness of freedom.
It seems to mark a turning point for him,
Yeah.
this reawakening of his spirit.
Huh.
He describes calling out to God from his narrow prison
Wow.
and being answered in the freedom of space.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it really highlights his journey of rediscovering meaning and purpose after enduring so much suffering.
But he also acknowledges that like
Yeah.
some people faced bitterness and disillusionment
They did, sadly.
when they returned home.
Yeah, some found their loved ones gone.
Oh, wow.
Their homes no longer there.
Yeah.
Others faced indifference or a lack of understanding from those who hadn't experienced the horrors of the camps.
Right.
It's a reminder that the journey back from trauma is rarely easy or straightforward.
Yeah, it can be a long process.
That can be.
For healing and reintegration.
Yeah.
So after experiencing all of this suffering, what does he ultimately say about, finding meaning?
Well, this is where his work takes this fascinating turn. His central argument is that meaning isn't something we find out there in the world.
Okay.
It's something we create
Huh.
within ourselves
Okay.
through our choices, our actions, our attitudes.
So instead of waiting for meaning to come to us,
Yeah,
we need to actively seek it out,
precisely.
even in the midst of challenging circumstances.
And this search for meaning, he argues,
Yeah.
this is what really drives us,
Mm.
what gives us purpose.
Yeah.
And he talks about the existential vacuum.
God,
that
yeah.
feeling of emptiness and meaninglessness
Right.
that can plague us,
Especially, I think, in modern society.
especially modern society. Yeah, he even asks the listener directly,
Uh-huh.
have you ever felt this way?
I think we all have at some point, right?
I think we all have.
That sense of being lost, not knowing what it's all about.
It's a common human experience.
Yeah.
And Frankl suggests that this existential frustration can manifest in different ways.
Okay.
Depression, aggression, addiction,
Right.
even a sense of apathy.
So he's really challenging us to, like, confront that emptiness
Yeah.
and actively seek out what gives our lives meaning. So how do we fill that void?
Right.
What's the antidote to this, existential vacuum?
Frankl offers several pathways.
Okay.
He emphasizes taking responsibility for our choices and actions,
Right.
realizing that even suffering can offer opportunities for growth and transcendence.
Yeah, he has that great quote.
He does.
It's not about what we expect from life,
Right.
but what life expects from us.
It's a perspective shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not about waiting for life to hand us happiness or fulfillment.
Uh-huh.
It's about actively engaging with its challenges
Right.
and finding meaning within them.
This reminds me of that example he gives of
Yeah.
the young man facing a terminal illness.
Yeah.
And he finds meaning not in seeking a cure,
Right.
but in facing his situation with courage and dignity.
Absolutely. And he was actually inspired by a character he saw in a film.
Like-
It just shows that, we don't need these grand gestures or heroic feats to find meaning.
Right.
It can be found in the everyday,
Yeah.
in the small acts of courage and kindness,
Right.
in choosing how we respond to even the most difficult circumstances.
And it highlights the power of, role models, of seeing how others have found meaning in their own struggles.
Yeah.
So it's about actively living a life that matters,
Yeah.
a life that has purpose,
Mm-hmm.
even if that purpose isn't always clear
Right.
or easy to define.
Absolutely. And in a world that often feels so chaotic and overwhelming,
Yeah.
I think that message is more relevant than ever.
It's really about uncovering that why,
Yeah.
that driving force that gives our lives purpose.
Exactly. And Frankl emphasizes that this why, it's going to be unique for each individual.
Right.
It could be family, it could be a fulfilling career, creative pursuits,
Yeah.
a cause you're passionate about,
Right.
even just, living each day with intention and gratitude.
Yeah. He really stresses that sense of personal responsibility,
He does.
of not becoming a victim of our circumstances.
Yeah, no matter how challenging they may be.
Exactly. Yeah.
We always have a choice in how we respond to our experiences,
Right.
how we interpret them, how we move forward.
It's not about denying the reality of suffering,
Yeah.
but it's about, finding meaning within it.
Yeah.
Allowing it to shape us without breaking us.
He uses this really powerful analogy to illustrate this.
Okay.
He compares suffering to a gas
Okay.
filling a chamber.
Uh-huh.
And no matter the size of the suffering,
Yeah.
it's always going to expand to fill the space it's given.
This is relative.
It is. It's
Yeah.
relative. And, comparing our struggles to others
Right.
doesn't diminish their impact on us.
It's not about minimizing,
Oh,
judging. It's about acknowledging,
Absolutely.
accepting,
Yeah.
and then choosing how we move through those experiences.
And this is where action comes in. Frankl doesn't just want us to, think about meaning.
Right.
He wants us to live it out.
Yeah, to embody it
Yeah.
in our daily lives.
Like that.
Aligning our choices with our values,
Uh,
even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard, he even talks about finding meaning in the face of death,
Wow.
urging us to approach it with courage and dignity.
That's a profound concept.
It is.
That meaning can transcend our time on earth.
Yeah, it's about leading a life of purpose.
Right. A life that truly matters.
Yeah.
Even if that purpose, kind of evolves.
Absolutely.
What really struck me about Frankl's work is how he actively sought out meaning,
Yeah.
even when he was stripped of everything.
Yeah, how can we cultivate that,
Ah.
that inner strength
That resilience.
in the face of our own struggles?
It's a great question. And I think as we wrap up this deep dive into man's search for meaning,
Yeah.
that might be the most valuable takeaway for our listeners. To kind of recap, what we've talked about today, even in the darkest of times, we have that freedom to choose our attitude and to find meaning.
Suffering is an unavoidable part of life,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to rob us of our humanity.
Or our purpose.
Right. And ultimately,
Yeah.
it's not about what we expect from life.
But what life expects from us.
Frankl's really challenging us to, think differently about these things.
Yeah, to really step up
Yes.
to the challenge of life.
And, this deep dive has really just scratched the surface
Yeah,
of his work.
there's so much more to explore.
There is. I highly encourage everyone to check out the full book.
Yeah, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah, and as you reflect on everything we've talked about today, consider this.
Yeah.
What's one small step you can take
Today,
to live more intentionally and cultivate a sense of meaning in your own life?
it could be reaching out to a loved one, engaging in a creative pursuit.
Taking a moment to appreciate the beauty around you.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
remember that meaning isn't something that's out there waiting to be found.
It's something we create.
Yeah.
Moment by moment.
Through our choices and our actions.
So go out there and make your life meaningful.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep diving deep.